works.
Okay. Sunnybrook's a good hospital.
Oh, it is. Excellent
Great.
hospital.
I
I
go
think
to
we might be
Sunnybrook.
on. I'm going to check. If anyone's there waiting in the chat, let us know if it's working. I think it might be. Hello, Seth. Good evening, Seth. We are on. We're on. Hey, awesome. Okay, we're here. Welcome to Brave New North. My name is Sean Conway. This is our first show. And thanks everyone for tuning in tonight. We were going to be on last week, but we had a couple of issues come on. Everything's okay. And we're going to give it a try tonight. We have Shelby Prokop-Millar here, and we have John Smith here, and we've just been chit-chatting for the last 15, 20 minutes, and I think we'll just continue that for the rest of the show. Maybe just we'll do some quick introductions, and maybe we'll start with Shelby, if you want to tell everyone who you are and what you're all about.
Okay, hi, I'm Shelby. I am a student from York University, and I'm studying for my Bachelor of Science in Psych. I'm also a Twitter troll. I'm Lefty Mind, that specializes, I suppose, in socialism, I guess. I kind of just do activism online, and that's kind of what I do. Other than that, I just kind of chill with my cat all day. So that's me.
That's great. So I was thinking about how I was gonna like give like a descriptor of Shelby, and I think I typed out Twitter provocateur like
Yeah.
12 times.
I,
And
It's me.
Before I introduce myself, I have to say that the shots that you have of me in the intros, right? It always looks like I'm the evil person coming in, right? You have been able to get these because I didn't provide you headshots, but I look like I have malicious intent. But
I
my
thought you
name.
looked coy.
Well, I know. Well, the koi on the second one, the first one, it looked like, and John Smith, the foreign agent type individual. Anyways, my name is John Smith. My father was a gentleman named Harry Leslie Smith, and about 11 years ago, we began a project with him called Harry's Last Stand, which was my father uh, telling people and writing books and speaking across Canada, the United Kingdom, Europe, and even in the United States about what life is like without a social safety net, what life is like without public health care, and what it means to be a citizen in the 21st century and how to reconnect to our socialist roots. And this was an amazing project because my father was in his 90s at that time. And he also incorporated the idea after the refugee crisis with Syria in 2015 of making refugees welcome. And he traveled to many refugee camps in Europe to try to get people to become greater aware of the need that we have as individuals and as societies to be more welcoming to refugees.
It's
Yeah,
amazing.
and it's so great to have you both here. I think we've got a nice holistic view of what's going on in the world, and I promise that'll be the only time I ever use the word holistic. But I think it's important. Originally we wanted to have our good friend MPP Joel Harden at Ottawa Center to join us, but the schedule in keeping up with the buffoonery of Doug Ford is definitely a tough one for an MPP, and we look forward to having him on again and all of that. So really, we wanted to take a look back at 2020. Looking back, I think my fondest memory of 2020 for me would have been um, the the plateau and sort of rising energy behind the Bernie Sanders primary campaign, which already on the 5th of January feels like 10 years ago. We've been through so much, I think, collectively here in Canada and the United States and the UK, everywhere. But I think globally that was a really important moment where Bernie won first couple primaries, and that was a really big moment. And I think there was real momentum behind a left movement in the United States, which is amazing. So maybe just if you want to think back 10 years ago when Bernie Sanders was leading in the polls against Donald Trump, maybe whoever wants to take a shot at
Well, I
that
mean,
first.
I'll go immediately, and I'll tell you, just because of the work that I do, because I'm a dual citizen in the United Kingdom, with labor and that sort of thing, that I knew that there was no way in hell that Bernie was going to get the nomination. Just knowing how the forces against Jeremy Corbyn had worked,
Yeah.
I knew the exact same momentum to dislodge Bernie would happen that had happened to Jeremy Corbyn, and that there would be this entire groundswell of the centrists, and also people on the right fighting to not get him, because Biden was their idea of the safe bet for neoliberalism, not for the people or anything like that, not for the safe bet to win the presidency, but to maintain a status quo that is unfair to most people. And that was why, in my opinion, and I was incredibly excited, and I kept on going, John, maybe you're being too cynical and that sort of thing. I'm going, no, they will make sure that he does not win. And I think that more or less I was proven right. Now, what will happen is, pundits on Biden's side will say, well, no, it was just because, he didn't have the numbers, he wasn't running a good game, and that, Biden was able to get a coalition. Now, Biden's coalition was already predetermined that it would be the party, the financial backers that were big business, Wall Street, and the media. And all of those combinations of forces got him the nomination. And quite frankly, and I'll just end with this, had there not been a pandemic, or had Trump not looked at that pandemic and said, I am going to be totally indifferent to human life, Biden would not have won this election. It was only the pandemic that threw in so much dissatisfaction with everybody, or not everybody, but enough people, that it moved it to Biden's win.
Shelby, do you want to hit on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. The 2020 Bernie Sanders run for presidency is really what got me into politics. I was always kind of interested in politics, but when it came to Bernie Sanders' run, I really got involved. I got on Twitter and everything. And I totally agree with John. There was always a piece of me where I'm like, the American establishment won't let him win. And as much as I tried to tell myself that, oh no, maybe he has a shot, he definitely has a shot, I would keep fighting and fighting and fighting. There's always that piece of me that just thought the American establishment wouldn't allow him to win. And I was so excited at the start, before Super Tuesday came. And I was like, you know what, maybe, like John thought, like, maybe I'm just being too cynical. Maybe, maybe he actually does have a shot, and maybe he's going to win. And then obviously we saw what happened. And I totally agree with him when it came to Biden. I didn't think Biden had a chance, maybe up until a month before the election, and how the abysmal job done by Trump and his administration. And now they're almost at 400,000 deaths. And I just knew, he blew it, which is good. I'm glad Trump lost. I'm not a fan of Biden either, but that's when I was kind of like, okay, this is the only reason why Biden won. It was because how poorly Trump did when it came to the COVID crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. My take on it, and I remember seeing news of coronavirus starting to come in and cases popping up through the continental United States, and thinking, well, this is it. This is going to be a big thing, and whoever the nominee is going to be Trump. Because I think ideologically and as an organization, Republicans are completely unprepared to deal with public health crisis. The same way we see that with Tories in the UK, with Tories across Canada, with right-wing governments in South America and all around the world, is just the inability for people to come together for the common good because of the that the
Yeah.
profound
I-
individualism around it. Mayor Pete or Klobuchar could have been the nominee and could beat Trump, but Kyle Kalinske said this a couple of weeks ago. I was listening to a show he was on, and he said, Biden under-delivered, because even with coronavirus, he was projected to win like 370 or something like that, electoral votes. And at the end of it, what are we like 306? And they got clobbered
Yeah.
in the House, they got clobbered in the Senate, and now everything is hinging on results that are coming in right now in Georgia. So I don't like Biden is exactly Hillary Clinton, and that it's the same campaign, and it
Yeah.
only worked this time because there was a deadly pandemic.
Literally.
Yeah. And the most frightening thing is that, and I have a few friends that live in the States, and they're not necessarily close friends, but I like to keep in contact with them because they come, or they have walked into a world of extreme wealth, so that I get to listen to them, and I am like the fly on the wall listening to how their reactions are to Biden, to Trump, and all of these things. And although that they may consider themselves liberal, one person said this to me, and he said about this election, and he said, the reason why I tell people on my street, and they live in a gated community that is, it would make Post Road look very low down key.
Love that.
And he said, the reason why I keep on telling my neighbors that they have to vote for Biden is that he said that because with Biden, they're not going to find themselves being strung up by an angry mob after 4 more years of Trump, because he is going to cause so much division that we will not be able to protect ourselves, even with the private guards that we have out front of the gates of our communities. And it was basically a self-interest thing, because they knew that with Biden anyway, and this is just, from my polling of these few people, but I think it's pretty well true, that the wealthy people of the United States made a decision of going, well, Biden, how much tax is he really going to take from us? How much is he really going to do that's going to upset us? Whereas this way we can get our next Republican candidate who will be like Trump, but have table manners. And that's the whole thing, because America's not wary of fascism. They just don't like impolite fascism.
Exactly.
And that's the thing, because Trump was Stanley Kowalski. And he was the Stanley Kowalski of presidents, and it freaked out people that do incredibly horrible things, but they do it in a sense of politeness, with an HR veil of decorum, and they go, well, there's rules to when we put people in cages. We just don't do it willy-nilly. We do it right. We do it for these reasons, and they're all horrible reasons. Yeah.
There was something that Kyle Kalinske said where he's like, Trump's like everything that the Republicans wish they could do.
Yeah.
But out in the open. And how Hassan, who's another streamer, also said the same thing, that don't forget that even when Trump leaves, all of those same senators are there, all those same Congress people are there, all of his supporters, which is 40% of the Republican Party, is still there. And this is something that's not going to go away. And that's something you're gonna have to deal with and fight with. And now that and this is something interesting that Hassan brought up, is now that we have that semi-fascist or fascist leader, that prepare that there could be someone who comes up who's even more emboldened, who is even more overtly a white supremacist. And that's something that you have to take into consideration. And I agree 100%, John, that there is that the wealthy in the end really don't care if Biden or Trump gets in, because Biden is just as just as bad when it comes to economics, especially when it comes to economic inequality, as Trump. He's just more, like you said, polite about it, and he's not going to fight. And the real person they're scared for is Bernie, because Bernie would have actually fought, and that's where Biden, they're just like, okay, whatever. He's just, at least he's a little bit more polite.
Well, the thing is that if in a parallel universe, Sanders had gotten the nomination and had won, the collective head of Wall Street would have exploded, because this sheer idea of going, a wealth tax, an actual tax on our wealth, an actual ability for us to be paying fair taxes,
Yeah.
public health care. This is the entire construct of the United States is based on one thing: to feed the entitlement of the 1%. And yet, it's sort of like this thing, and everybody, a great deal of people buy into it. Like in Canada, people buy the Lotto Max every Tuesdays or Fridays or whenever it is, because they think that capitalism works very much like a lottery. You have a small chance of actually winning millions, but most of us are going to spend our lives digging ditches, moving around, hoping that debt doesn't crush us, and just hoping that we can get some happiness out of the time that we have on this earth while we struggle and they enjoy the entitlements that our labor has provided them.
Exactly. They literally, like you said, they literally sit there dangling the money in front of us, being like, well, capitalism's great because there is that 0.00001% chance you could ever get to my level. And that's the disgusting part about it. And I actually did a whole article via Nouvelle News on the wealth tax. And I'm going to pull up some stats real quick, actually, while we're on the topic of the Canadian wealth tax.
Prepared for the show.
Yes. Yes. So Canada's top 1% owns 25.6% of Canada's wealth, which is insane. But when you look at the 0.5%, they own 20.5% of all of Canada's wealth. So that's less than 1% owns that much, which is equivalent to $2.4 trillion. And it's absolutely insane.
It's obscene.
And what all the other thing is too is it's not only insane, it's counterproductive to democracy.
Exactly.
Because when you have that accumulation of that much wealth, you cannot have a true democracy, because that wealth is not neutral. That wealth is pushing through lobby groups and through politicians and through corporations to grow that wealth. And that wealth can only come from us, right? And it's this horrible cyclical effect, because and this is one thing that my father was fighting for throughout most of his life, and especially at the end of his life, was that the social contract that were given to citizens after the Second World War, that more or less, and it was imperfect, this social contract, and it was also based upon a lot of racism as well. But the point is that the essential point of the social contract was that everybody has a right to housing, to healthcare, to education, and to have a productive, decent, caring life.
Yeah.
And that went out the window by the end of the 1970s.
Yeah.
And we found that with whether it was Reagan, Thatcher, Mulroney, it didn't matter. It was happening in a pandemic sense politically across the Western world, where right-wing ideology was driving our economic forces. And that's how we got free trade and we got everything else.
And the scary part is, even in the mid 70s, it was the liberals who were starting to adapt the neoliberal ideology, because I believe we had Pierre Trudeau in the mid 70s was our prime minister. He was adopting a lot of neoliberal ideology by then. Yep. And on top of that, we also had the American president during the 1979, he was a Democrat. Can't think of his name right now. Carter. We had Carter, who started adopting the neoliberal ideology that then brought us to Reagan. And then we also had Labor at the time in the 1970s.
Exactly. Now, I mean, the other thing is too, is we'll get off this, but with Carter, I mean, Carter was anti-union, right? He was not an FDR Democrat. He was, as you said, the beginning of the transformation of the Democratic Party into a money party for the establishment.
Exactly.
Counterpoint, I would say it started at JFK with the collapse of the New Deal coalition.
100%.
I give you that.
And that's when we saw, that shift, from through Johnson, who was kind of good, through all the rest of them, to Nixon. We get to the culmination of the neoliberal project with Thatcher, Reagan, Mulroney, and just the obliteration of the promise of the New Deal and the promise of human rights and values in a modern society.
Yeah.
where the government and political machines of the government actively sought to suppress human rights.
Yeah.
I want to shout out to the chat here. We got a good point, and it'll bring us back to the US for just a second, into just a couple of weeks ago. Seth in the chat said that if Donald Trump would have went on for $2,000 stimulus checks in the general, he would have won.
Yeah.
I agree.
100%.
And to go back, there's two more points. I think I saw someone on Twitter trolling, saying, hey, Donald Trump, you know what would really make the liberals angry? Medicare for all.
Oh yeah.
Hey, Donald Trump, do you know
Yeah.
what would really, really, really make the Democrats mad? If you pulled the troops out.
Yeah.
Well,
originally that's what Trump ran on. He didn't
well,
run on
originally.
Medicare for all, but he ran on, I'm going to expand Medicare. I'm going to get the troops out of the Middle East. He didn't end up doing any of it, but
No.
if anything, he cut Medicare. He increased the amount of people who were in the Middle East. But he ran on that anti-establishment, which Hillary was far from. And that's one of the reasons he won, because people were like, I thought Obama was this this anti-establishment figure, or at least he was better. We went through Bush. It was awful. Obama's like this light at the end of the tunnel. And then he ended up being terrible. He ended up, drone striking like every country in the Middle East. And he didn't really help them. And he half-assed Medicare when he could have easily got them Medicare for all. And when he had the super majority at the start of his presidency. And that's one of the reasons why, and that's something Kyle Kalinske talked about, is one of the reasons why Trump ended up winning. Well, obviously, because there's more to it than that. There's racism, everything. But one of them was that economic inequality that people put aside, that, okay, maybe he's racist, but blah, 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 which is very similar to what ended up happening in Nazi Germany too, as well, that people brushed off, sadly, and still even sadly with Trump, the horrific anti-Semitism that was happening at the time. They just brushed it off. Some people.
I mean, and this is the thing too. And I think the thing is that, and people don't, or a lot of people don't like to recognize this, but Obama was probably, if I wanted a motivational speaker, I think he was probably the greatest motivational speaker ever. But he was a rubbish president. And that it's one thing, having the oratory of Shakespeare and yet not delivering anything. And it's not like it's because they were against me, they were racist. And I'm going, no, because the point is you look at somebody like FDR, who they were against FDR as well, yet he was able to bring the country out of the Depression with a stimulus program that was innovative. And yet, when the crash came in 2008-9, they did nothing.
Exactly.
Right? And that it may have happened on Bush's watch, but the cleanup was Obama. And they had a choice of how to clean this up. And they chose, like they chose not to prosecute anybody for Iraq, that they were not going to make anybody guilty for the crash. And people remembered that because, again, the top 10% of wage earners always will be the top 10% of wage earners. But it's everybody else that's getting squeezed throughout that crash. And they know that they're being lied to by everybody that they're watching on television, from the pundits to the politicians. And that pushed them over to Trump too.
Mm-hmm. They didn't bail out the people. They bailed out the CEOs. They bailed out all the corporations, bailed out Wall Street completely, and then let everyone else suffer, essentially.
And then also too, it's also, and it's a bizarre thing because I see it in my demographic, and even I'm 57 now, but my demographic and the generation below me, males, whites, they are the most grumpiest, unintellectual, non-reflective group I have ever met. And especially if they are economically not as successful as they think they should be. And they are absolutely easy to trap by right-wing media and politicians. Because they go, it's not your fault. And it isn't their fault. But who they blame for this is the interesting thing. And they go, okay, that makes sense, right? And it doesn't make sense, but it's an easier thing for them to actually say it's immigration. It is this culture that has given women the right to take our jobs, or immigrants and migrants. And it's, our proliferation of welfare, which is all untrue. And all of those things go, yeah, because I've worked all the time. Why is everybody else taking from me? And it's a complete lie, but it works well. And then that's why people tick the boxes for people like Trump or Kenny or Ford.
100%. That's 100% it. And it's to deflect from capitalism and say the boogeyman isn't capitalism. It's the immigrants and the refugees coming from the Middle East. It's the indigenous people. It's Black Canadians. It's all of this except for the true demons, which are the demons hiding under our beds that we have around us all the time, which is capitalism. They are the people who are ruining our lives. They're the people consistently suppressing us. And it's a brilliant tactic on their part. It's a horrid tactic, but it's brilliant when it comes to the neoliberal status quo or the neoconservative status quo, which it more aligns with.
I mean, and I know somebody in my circle in a distance, and this is the typical thing. His family were trade unionists. All of his housing, education came because his parents were in a trade union that got better salaries because they negotiated and were able to fight for their workers. He's in a union, and yet he's right wing. He votes right wing. And you sit there and you're going, it's a complete logical disconnect on why somebody would make those choices. Because, and I always enjoy telling him, I'm going, everything that you have gotten in your life is because of trade unionism and left-wing politics.
Exactly.
And yet you want to negate that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like even in my one class that I learned about was on labor, how we all fearmonger about communism. But if it wasn't for the Communist Party during the 1940s and the CCF, we wouldn't have a majority of the labor laws that we have today. And it was because of them who fought the hard fight against the government at the time, Mackenzie King. And he had no interest. He had no interest at all in actually helping workers' rights and doing any of that. If it wasn't for those workers, the communists, the socialists going out in the streets and saying, no, this is how we want it, we would have nothing right now. So that's the thing.
And again, like even speaking about that time period, it was so, the Red Scare was so prevalent and pervasive that when my parents emigrated to Canada, it was 1953, and my mother was originally a German citizen. So in their British passport,
same with my family,
right? Because in their British passport, they had rights to travel to Berlin to visit relatives there, which gave them, and it's stamped on that, freedom to travel through the Soviet Red Zone.
Mm-hmm.
And when they arrived and they showed this passport to the Canadian Customs, they seized their luggage, their steamer truck, because they thought that there could be communist stuff in there.
Oh
and so that this was in Montreal. So they had to take the train from Montreal to Toronto without any of their clothing. And they had to wait 10 days for it to be cleared by customs. And that was just because of that stamp. And even when they tried to get into the United States the first time, they were turned back because they're going, wow, if you can travel to the a Soviet zone in Eastern Germany, therefore you must be a communist.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, and it's funny, and it was great in a lot of ways because my father was able to figure out with that the idea of racial profile, because he understood that. He goes, look, I was profiled just by the simple fact that I had a stamp in my passport and my wife was German. So how bad is it for a Muslim Canadian that is being profiled because of the way they look or the way they speak?
Exactly, 100%. Yeah. And they can't get away from it.
No, of course
not.
And
that's the thing.
And that's it. And that's what he understood. He understood that instinctively, that the slight inconvenience that he had was nothing to the persecution that people had that were communists and had been marked as communists and would lose their jobs and that sort of thing. Or in our present century, where Muslims were targeted for their religion and because of the way they looked.
Exactly.
I think that's a great point. And going back to into like what's next from the right wing in the United States. I think it's pretty clear to look at some of the activities over the last couple of weeks in Josh Hawley, in Ted Cruz, Tom Cotton. I'll put on the record here right now that it'll be probably either the top three are going to be Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz running for 2024. Maybe
Yep.
Donald Trump again.
Maybe.
Maybe. You never know. If Donald Trump ran again, he would win the nomination.
Yeah.
Easy. And do I think Biden is going to make it 4 years? No, absolutely not.
So.
Do I think Kamala Harris could pull off the nomination? I don't think so.
No.
I don't, I see nothing fundamentally changing with.
See, I have that fear. I have that fear that she would win. That's my fear. And I think if Nina Turner would run, which she would be a powerhouse candidate and I would 100% get behind her, it would be difficult for Kamala. But I'm scared that once again, as John was saying at the start, my fear is that it will come down to the neoliberal establishment again and would push Kamala through, even though Nina, I think, would be more successful than Bernie. And I'm putting that on the record. I think Nina would be a lot more successful candidate than Bernie.
I think, yeah, go ahead, John.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I think looking at the Ohio race right now where Senator Turner is running is going to be really exciting to see when that election is called. Probably sometime in February. That's going to be great. It's going to be great, I think, to get Nina Turner in Congress, because if there's all of this hullabaloo around the squad right now after Force the Vote and Pelosi as Speaker and all of this, having Nina Turner in, I think, changes the game.
Oh yeah,
quite a bit. Someone with a proven legislative record as state senator, as councilwoman in Cleveland. That's huge, I think, for the progressive movement and for the left movement in the United States, because I think we're seeing a schism in the progressive movement into the progressive movement and to the left, but we'll see what happens in a couple of years. But these sort of things happen all the time. But I think just having people that are going to advocate for the working class and all of that, like Nina Turner is such a breath of fresh air. Her podcast is amazing. Like everything Nina Turner does, I'm 1000% there for.
Same.
Do I think that she's going to run for president? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think all the usual neoliberal ghouls are lining up the way they did because they all want Barack Obama to endorse them, as they did when Barack Obama made the phone call before Super Tuesday.
Yep.
Hey, Amy. Hey, Pete. Why don't you drop out and endorse old Joe and let Joe be the president for a couple of years, and then you can have a go at it. People forget that Kamala Harris dropped out before California because she wasn't going to win. And Bernie took California, one of the biggest states, like highest population, by a landslide.
I think he won every single district, if I'm not mistaken.
It was a blowout in California for Bernie Sanders because he was able to tap into working class in California and also to establishment Dems, I think, who see progressivism as more palatable probably on the coast. And that's just that shift in postal elitism and whatnot. But I think appealing to those, inner California districts was really valuable for Bernie, and he had great people organizing for him on the ground.
Amazing people organizing for him.
It's just phenomenal. So we get out of the primary, we're into the general. Joe Biden is dragged in a wheelbarrow full of
basically
stones, and Strom Thurmond is pushing the wheelbarrow with the crime bill and the Glass-Steagall Act over the finish line.
Yep.
And he's going to be the president.
The Iraq supporter. They just got him all over.
and here we are. It's a clock counting down, I think,
Would you
is
want to
Right.
all it
talk?
is.
Would you want to talk about the leftist infighting both in Canada and the States about forced to vote?
Oh, we can talk about anything. Yeah. I think leftist infighting is a very healthy thing.
Yeah.
As toxic as it is, it's very healthy.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, I think it's incredibly healthy, but again, what you see, and this is right now, if you look at UK Labour, it is in complete schism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a complete. I cannot. My own personal opinion is that it will not. I don't think Starmer's going to be leader, uh, and I also think that that they will not win the next general election, which
No.
because
Yeah.
this idea of returning to Blairism is an immediate end of them. First of all, also, and the other thing is too is that with all of the infighting, which is healthy in the sense of that it's preventing the centrists and the neoliberals from crowning themselves rulers of labor. But the other thing is too, is, and then we'll go back to the infighting, is my own personal opinion is the United Kingdom will not exist in 4 years' time. Anyways,
We
I
can
am
only
absolutely,
Yeah.
hope.
Yeah.
yeah,
Scotland will leave.
yeah. Scotland's gone.
Yeah,
Wales
Scotland's
will
already gone.
go. Northern Ireland, they have really no reason to
No.
be part of the union, and that leaves England. And it's I don't even know if I feel like I don't feel sorry about this because I'm going. It's
Neither do
not like
I.
it was a great experiment. It was an experiment in occupation and in oppression, right? And
Yeah.
also, like
Yeah.
some good things came out of it. I'm going like, eh, I'm going. I'm going. That's unfortunate, but maybe England is England might actually get its act together and become like Norway or a smaller European country that cares,
Yeah.
like Norway. I think that's pretty well
Well, I
said.
think I look at it as, from our I think from our perspective, we believe that empire is bad.
Yes.
And we look at the UK as the old empire. And capital is the new empire. It has been for the last 100,
Yeah.
200 years. But the UK it's not a project, it's an exercise in empire. It always
There you
was.
go. Yeah.
The Commonwealth, you know, I don't know. I'm 100% for a united Ireland. I'm a card carrying member of Sinn Féin um, in the International Carta. Um, but the like Irish unity needs to be number one, as well as Scottish independence. New polling came out from some, Twitter, um, you know, group that advocates for unionism in Scotland, and they just got pummeled in this poll that came
Oh
out.
yeah.
Something like
Amazing.
89%
Yeah.
of Scots want out of the UK because honestly, Brexit is really bad. It was like that article that was I think it was in the Daily Mail, and it was something like, like some guy stuck with a bunch of sex toys, and he's like, I voted to leave, but now I'm stuck with all these sex
Yeah.
toys in Calais.
Yeah.
Like it,
No, and it was sheer. It where you're going. Ontario voters look rather intellectual because they just voted for buck a beer, right? Whereas where you get a large swath of England that voted, we want to leave because we want our country back and ruled by people that never cared for us anyways, and that with the European Union, which is horribly has it is not what I would like it to be, but on an economic level, it's very good for trade. It does all of those things, and it has room to grow. The United Kingdom has no room to grow as an independent
yeah.
nation.
No.
I just want to point out that the chat is yelling at us because we forgot to talk about Wales, and maybe if we don't want to be accused of
No, I
Welsh
think they should go
erasure,
through.
I think Wales could join into a united Celtic republic. That'd be pretty good. You never
Yeah,
know.
and the thing is too is that, like I said, that I would, there is a strong growing sense of Welsh independence.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
and again, it's there is nothing left when in the idea of the United Kingdom, if it's Tory centric and
Yeah.
it's based upon austerity, it's based.
I gotta go check on something. John, you're in charge.
Oh, thanks. Well, just because I'm the oldest one.
Yeah, I'm
That's
the
right.
baby.
That's right. We'll have free drinks on Sean.
Yes, I am of
But
age.
but so what I found is like I said, that there's really not a lot that I would be left to say has any need for the United Kingdom to exist any longer, as long as it's being
100%.
run by Tories.
And exactly when it comes to Blairism, is that the young people are all Corbynites.
Yeah.
All the young people part of the Labour Party, and they with Keir Starmer, and they're literally just going to self implode. And all the documents came out how they literally screwed over Corbyn and how they
Yeah, I
all
know.
the inside. And it's like you're screwing over all your millennials and Gen Zs who went out there and powerhouse for Corbyn.
And the thing is like I said, that with Corbyn and that sort of thing, and I met him quite a few times, and my dad knew him
wow.
quite well. And actually, Corbyn spoke at my dad's memorial in London.
Oh,
But
wow,
the thing
that's
is that
amazing.
Corbyn, he's genuine. And he's like Bernie in the sense that he's genuine. And he's less of a firebrand than Bernie. It's just he's always been on the right side of history, right? He fought against the Iraq War. He stood with the IRA during the hunger strikes. He did all of those things. He stood for Mandela and all of these things. And he was always on the right side of history. And he also always believed that everybody had a right to food, to housing, to healthcare, to education. And these things seem to upset people that are in politics now. And they go, well, we can't really give everybody that because then we have to take it away from our benefactors.
Exactly.
The people that we aspire to be. Right. I mean, it was, and it was like when the Ontario finance minister went, I first of all, I had no belief that he ever wanted to be premier because I think that man just wants to be a multimillionaire. I think that everything that he's done in his life has been to make sure that he will be the richest man in Ontario, and that his ambition was only the ambition to accumulate wealth, which is where I see a lot of Tory politicians.
Oh yeah.
In this entire spectrum, and that's the most frightening thing because we see it here in Ontario, we definitely see it in Alberta, and throughout the entire country. And this goes back to what we were saying about the United States, which is what I wanted to bring up, was that as in Canada, and whatever with the Liberals as a federal party, but the problem is that even if you have and I'm putting this in air quotes, a centrist government as a federal government, when you have the majority of your provinces as Tory governments, you are basically just putting wallpaper up for tourists to say, oh, Canada is so warm and welcoming. No, all of these other provinces, the majority of them have austerity. They have privatized their healthcare systems through stealth. They have horrible systemic racism problems. And that's all being done on a provincial level. And it's the same thing in the states because the majority of the states are Republican. But all of the real nuts and bolts legislation that affects people, their working lives, their housing, their education is coming through a state level. And it's all being driven from an extreme right-wing perspective.
Exactly.
And what Doug Ford does is no different than what a Republican governor does down in the States. They both want the same thing. 100%. And they will both do the same things to get there.
Yeah, because 100% they'll push austerity till the bitter end, and they'll cut as soon as Ford got in, he immediately cut a bunch of labor rights from the labor code. I forget which ones, but my dad worked in construction, and he was affected by all of them. And it's speaking about also liberalism. You see a lot of the liberals. So a lot of the times, at least when they're in federal government, they'll always play the jurisdiction card. Oh, well, we can't expand pharmacare. Well, because it's not a jurisdiction. Well, we also have the Canada Health Act from 1984 that your own father, might I add, Justin, implemented, which you can easily add things to, like pharmacare.
Yeah. You can set the standard. Something that the NDP has been talking about for 30, 40 years is, like a baseline provincial healthcare system, a baseline provincial pharmacare program,
Exactly.
dental, like all of these things can be done through the legislative tools of the Canada Health Act, which is an extremely versatile document if you actually want to go in and change anything. You don't have to wait for the provinces. It's classic liberalism to, beware the allure of gradualization.
Oh yeah.
And that's it. That's what they do. And that's why I think, this is my hot take, I think the Liberal Party and the Liberal brand is failing in the provinces across Canada. You see it because we now see an emboldened right wing and then a burgeoning left wing through NDP opposition parties, governments in British Columbia. Are they perfect? Hell no. But better than Liberals, better than Tories.
Yes.
And they're more open to moving on policy positions because that's the way that those parties were built, not based around an ideology of, fascism and Toryism and neoliberalism and the mushy middle, but based around, well, like, how can we actually help people? Which I think should be the goal of anyone who wants to be a part of government, a part of their community, a part of leadership or anything. The end goal you have to be able to help people. And if you're not doing that, go fly a kite.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna be swearing on the show yet. I haven't decided.
No, swear,
yet.
go for it.
So if anybody on the chat thinks I should swear, let me know. We'll put a big R up on the.
I actually did that in another Zoom YouTube thing with student nurses in the UK. And I found that I was swearing more and more, and I'm going like, and they're looking at me like I'm going like, Uncle is getting really angry.
Well, I live out in the country. Don't the Blazer might hide it, but I'm like I swear quite a bit.
Oh, I swear a lot.
I am known to cuss.
I think our Twitter accounts are all open to the public, so I think
so they can see.
I know. I think I called Ford an effing idiot last night.
Sorry, speaking of the NDP, I think in the last so many years, maybe 2 years, they've really come a long way when it comes to leftism. Am I still a fan of the provincial NDP? Not so much. That's just my opinion. But I think the federal government has come quite a bit in the past so many years from the Mulcair-Layton era. So I give them a lot of credit.
Oh, there's no question about that. Now, my own gut feeling is that the real fight, the real long-lasting fight, is to ensure that Ontario gets an NDP government, because that will be the cornerstone to push other provinces into a left-wing confederacy. And it is because if Ontario can do it, and Ontario then an NDP government can introduce a form of proportional representation.
Exactly.
That is the framework that will convince the rest of the country that we can work with PR.
Exactly.
PR is the most democratic way of actually getting people involved in politics.
And I know Joel is supposed to be on here, but I think the perfect replacement for Andrew Horwath would be Joel as the leader of the NDP for Ontario. I think
you heard it here first.
Yeah, I heard it here. Yeah. A lot of young NDPers really like Joel. And I honestly think at this point, he could probably save the party on his stances, both in foreign policy and he's an open socialist. And so I think that he could definitely help no.
I mean, what needs, because what's going to happen now? I think that the leadership will stay the same.
Same. Right. I don't think Andrew's leaving anytime soon.
And I think the thing is that with this election that will come up now, I don't know. My gut feeling is that unfortunately, I think the feds are going to pull the election card out this spring. And I think that all things being equal, Ford will probably try to do it in the fall.
Yep.
Early fall. If things are going great with folks and the cheesecake recipe and all of that.
Oh, jeez. Don't want to get me started on that.
I know. It was funny, and I just go quickly. I was walking when I take my walk. I walk through some neighborhoods that are well off, and some neighborhoods that aren't well off. And I walked by the Dream Whip in a recycling box, and I thought, well, they got Doug Ford's recipe for that cheesecake.
Oh, jeez. No.
But
Please no.
the idea that that if there is an election called in Ontario before the feds means that everybody has to push, if they're left leaning, for the NDP anywhere and everywhere, but also looking at if there are other areas where a Liberal or a Green can win and an NDP can't, we have to push that, because if we can just get a minority government of NDP, that's a lot better, or a minority any government, we are in a much better stand. And I think that we have to be very tactical here and go, okay, this riding, we can give the Liberals 10 more seats than what they already have, because they're not going to form government. But if we can get it to the point that we have enough with even the Greens and the Liberals and the NDP to unseat Ford, that means we're closer to actually getting real sick days for workers.
Exactly.
That means that we're actually closer to getting at least a provincial pharmacare.
Yeah, a provincial pharmacare.
That these are all of the things that are within our reach. But if we give Ford another 4 years of majority government, there will be nothing left in this province.
Yeah.
There will be no health care because the Westons will own it.
Oh, yeah.
And there will be no workers' rights. There will be probably a reduction in the minimum wage, because he would go, you know what? We can't afford, our industries, our businesses struggled so much. We're going to have to roll back that minimum wage to $12 an hour or $11 or 10 or whatever number he wants. And if he has that majority, he will be able to do that. That's why we have to fight.
Which is fascinating, especially because they have no right to say any of that. Because when you look, when Tommy Douglas got into Saskatchewan was on the brink of a recession, like a major recession. They were in the middle of a drought when he got into Tommy Douglas CCF. Tommy Douglas took that province and with his scary socialism and the Red Scare, literally flipped the entire province and actually created a surplus. You know, I don't really care about the debt personally, but to the people, the Liberals are screaming about the debt all the time, and the Conservatives, you had a socialist literally cause a surplus, that there was almost no longer a debt in the country, in the province, and that they had extra money. And Ford can't sit here and say we need to cut when Chrétien and Mulroney and Trudeau have all been screaming about it since the 80s and the 90s, and it's literally done nothing. If anything, it's made us less prepared for COVID from Chrétien's massive cuts to the social safety net and massive cuts to healthcare.
I mean, the point is that this whole idea of the debt is a giant smokescreen for reducing what governments pay for. Because and I had this argument with so many people, because first of all, when it started to be couched that the debt was like your family's budget.
Oh God, please don't.
My family and myself are personally not immortal like the state is. If I was immortal, I could care less about my visa bill because I've got 3,000 years to pay it off, and I can keep it because I'll be working those 3,000 years. And under the concept that Canada being a G7 nation will always have a strong economy, means that you can incur a lot of debt.
Exactly.
But this is always sold, and it is sold to such an extent that on the CBC yesterday, Hannah Thibodeau starts talking about, well, we've got to pay back that debt. And I'm going, why are you a journalist? Why would a journalist say anything so economically illiterate as that?
They're there to push the status quo. Their donors, the money they got.
And my other point was, and I put that out on Twitter, was I'm going, isn't it funny? Because I'm going, you're talking about all of the CERB money and all of this stuff that caused the debt. And I'm going, you're as subsidized as anybody that's on CERB. Your wage is like a CERB wage because you are subsidized by the government or
Mhm.
otherwise your wage would be at least 50% of that.
Exactly. And like also on the debt too, how Stephanie Kelton, who was a well-known economist for creating modern monetary theory, once again it works on the lines of capitalism again. So taking the capitalist portion aside, she was able with a group of people to be able to discover modern monetary theory.
Yeah.
And she worked with Bernie, and the government controls the dollar. They can print money, and yes, you can print money without it causing inflation.
Yeah.
And there
You
has
can
been
control
studies showing
inflation
you can
through a
control
central bank.
inflation. Exactly. And it's such a pile of shit that they
Yeah.
say that we can't print money, we can't do this. But when you look at speaking of the debt, just real quick, I want to talk about Japan real quick. So Stephanie Kelton brought up this excellent example of the debt to GDP ratio. When you look at Japan, they have almost a debt to GDP ratio over 200%, and they have yet, and their inflation is maybe 3%, almost net zero, and they have not caused an economic crash.
No.
Canada spends probably the least in the G7. I think they do spend the least per capita on people. We're not going to have a crash. I'm pretty sure our debt to GDP ratio is actually disgusting how low it is. And it shows you that you can get into that 200 plus and you can invest in your people and still have an inflation. If we're going to scream and cry about inflation, at almost net zero. And it's absolutely disgusting. And they keep pushing and pushing this fear mongering so they can cut. And then as soon as they cut our Medicare to the point where it's almost our universal healthcare to the point where it's almost not working for us, they're like, oh, well, we're going to have to privatize it because it's clearly not working. The public's not working, even though we've cut it since the 90s and we've cut it essentially since the 80s.
You know, in Ontario, we had the Province of Ontario Savings Office up until 1994, which is an interesting thing to look up if you're into MMT, modern monetary theory, and specifically the deficit myth from Stephanie Kelton. In Ontario, we actually had a public bank.
Yeah.
Now, it was designed through the Bank of Canada in order to finance infrastructure and large capital projects for development and infrastructure and XYZ, you name it, and borrowing at less than 0 or 0% interest from ourselves. Like, we had it. The problems, you know, we had the system. It was in place in Ontario. Mike Harris stole it.
Of course he did.
Of course he did, right?
It's gonna win too, though.
Who's betrothed to modern capital? And that's the word. Sorry, I'm just shouting back to the chat here. Somebody said that indebted was probably not the right word when we were talking about Joe Biden and Wall Street, but betrothed, I think, might be the right word. But we were able to do all kinds of things with the Province of Ontario Savings Office through modern monetary theory.
Also, Leo Panich, sorry.
I've
been reading about Leo Panich. She says you don't work at the behest, you work on behalf. Because if you worked at the behest of the government and a capitalist, in the behest of your donors and the capitalist society, you're essentially going to end up ruining capital itself, because you're going to allow them to get to the point where they're going to become so greedy that they're going to end up imploding themselves. That's why you work, as Leo Panich has stated in the 70s, I believe. He stated that no, they have to work on behalf, because they can't let them implode if you're working in a capitalist society. You can't let them become too greedy. You have to put some you have to moderate them in some way to the point where they don't self-implode.
Just saw a great comment in the chat. Taxes are the government destroying money.
Yeah, basically.
And I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, you could print money essentially. And that was fascinating about actually Stephanie Kelton, is that she said you actually don't even necessarily, when you look at modern monetary theory, you necessarily don't even have to do taxation. You can essentially print money and then you can do it in other ways. But that was a fascinating thing.
Well, income tax is really a product of the world wars. And how did governments operate before then?
Exactly. We operated somehow. And people tend to forget that we've lived for thousands of years without capitalist societies, and capitalism wasn't even a thing. Before that, we had feudalism, And capitalism,
But the entire theme throughout all of those systems was oppression.
oppression, 100%.
And economic theft of labor, whether it be under feudalism,
Yep.
or slavery, or even in the genesis of capitalism, and that sort of thing.
Exactly. It was all based on oppression.
And that's the thing where it's one of those things that, first of all, that even getting back to Biden and that sort of thing, when we were talking about it, about what Biden's going to do in the next 4 years, I think a couple of the major problems is not even looking at who's going to be running in 4 years' time, because I think in 4 years' time, it came out that statistically, China will be the #1 economy in 10 years' time.
Oh yeah.
If that, in my, just in a historical sense, my feeling is anytime one superpower becomes more dominant than the other superpower, there's a clash. And
Yep.
it will be first economic, and then it will go to subterfuge and stealth wars, and then it goes out to full war. And so I mean, I think that there's a major problem there. And the other thing that we haven't really talked about yet is the environmental crisis.
Yeah.
That I don't think that Biden's going to deliver the goods on that.
Oh, 100% no.
And I think that is going to spell. It's one of those things, because you try not to say it in a panicky way, but I'm going, I really think that all of this stuff is spelling, if not our extinction as a species, our diminishment as a species, that we would wish that we were extinct. And it's because I thought about that too, because of the way COVID is being approached. Because I'm going, if and a lot of this too is just because of they're trying to use the nudge theory instead of being truthful to their citizens. But I think there's a major problem trying to, first of all, fix the environmental crisis when you have developed every citizen as a consumer, right? And said, your purpose is to consume. Your purpose is to get more than your neighbor. And that
compete.
And it's in competition, and it's buying everything that's disposable. Because it amazes me that, and again, it's one of those things where you look at fashion today, where it will not last more than a year.
Exactly.
And whereas there was a point in time where you could wear clothing for a longer period of time because it was made for more durableness. And it's one of those things where the labor producing it is exploitive. And then they're going, but we want you to go back for more so we can exploit more people and make more profit. And it's all of these things that are combining that are going to make it very hard, regardless of the Paris Accords and all of that stuff, which I think are, again, more window dressing, because we need real draconian measures.
Yeah.
To end this. And the only way that we can do it. And also, but the point is that when you say that, you're going, and I guess it might be because I don't consider going to Costco a pleasant experience. So I don't mind that I don't have to go to Costco because of the pandemic or because of the environmental crisis. But a lot of people have put that as a sense of what their outing should be. And we have to in some way shift that type of priority.
That's something Noam Chomsky's actually talked about too, about that consumerism that we've created, that let's go to the mall, let's do this instead of let's go out in the wild and let's enjoy the nature. And speaking of the environmental crisis, I actually, once again, shout out to myself. I wrote a whole article on Canada needs a Green New Deal for a post-pandemic economic recovery.
Great article. I think I read it.
Thank you. And how it would be essential to our recovery. And a lot of people don't know that actually the NDP, specifically Peter Julian, I don't think, which upsets me, I don't think the party has adopted motion M1. So it's just a private member's bill. I don't think it's actually been adopted by the NDP, which is very disappointing. But it's actually extremely similar to that of Bernie Sanders' proposal when he ran. And a lot of people wouldn't know that and how extremely it's similar. And honestly, I was quite impressed with Peter Julian's writing on it, actually.
Oh yeah, no. And I mean, and it's one of those things, like I said, that we need politically, we can't do things in small measures anymore.
No, we can't.
And this is, we have to be bold, and it's one of those things where we have to say what, and we have to, and honestly, the toughest thing, which is what Canada has to do more of. Now, Britain is doing much better with that, but with independent media, in the sense of
Yes.
of independent groups, and like what Labor did with their Momentum group, which was formed independently of the Labor Party,
Yes.
and then worked with it as a youth wing. And it was even more than a
Exactly.
youth wing, because it was inclusive of all ages. And that's what I think the NDP needs to do, is have those types of wings incorporated into its party, so that it becomes something that is not, what we have to make politics again is like in the 1930s, where we are proselytizing, where you are going into areas and telling people, you know how you get out of this is by voting this way. And I'll tell you why. And these are the stories why. This is the proof why. And it will take a long while, but we still have to do it. Because I was amazed that in Belleville, they have the poverty action committees. I think they're all across Ontario.
I think they are.
And they're provincially funded,
Oh,
which is
wow.
rather interesting. And I remember, and this is when my dad was still alive. And I said, you know what you people should be doing? And they said, what? I said, you should be registering the poor to vote
You should
in
be.
municipal elections, and getting them to vote for councillors that want to bring in housing that is affordable for them. And they looked at me and they said, we can't be political. And I'm going,
Okay.
poverty is political.
Yeah.
And I'm going, so that you are being paid off by the government to do nothing.
Essentially.
That is basically, now I'm not saying that all of them are like that. I'm just saying this was my experience with this one here, right? I'm quite sure that because I'm sure that I'll get, tweets going, oh, wait a second, ours does this and that. Maybe you do, but I'm saying that that's what I
The
heard
Belleville faction.
in the Belleville faction. And I was absolutely appalled by this, because I'm going, poverty is political. We have to go in the municipal fields and break down those barriers, because in Belleville and everywhere else, it's all business people that control the councils. And
Exactly.
if they're controlling the councils, they're controlling how the tax money is being spent in those areas. They're controlling what type of infrastructure projects there are being done. And they're going to be done for the benefit of the richest people in that community.
100%. 100%. No, and
We just had, oh, go ahead, Shelby.
oh no, I wasn't really gonna say anything.
Oh, we just had in the chat, somebody wanted some practical advice. I'm going to go grab myself a pint while you proselytize on this question from one of our dear readers, is how do we get past the messaging of Bob Rae when we're campaigning in Ontario?
You see, what I'm always amazed about this Bob Rae thing is that I can remember Bob Rae because I'm 57, but most people can't remember Bob Rae, and they've turned him into a boogeyman that doesn't really exist anymore, or isn't really relevant to modern socialism. So that
Exactly.
I think the thing is, you're going, well, that's fine. Bob Rae, that happened over 30 years ago, right? It is absolutely immaterial to the way the modern NDP operates and what it wants.
Well, it's actually hilarious, because when you actually look at his record, Bob Rae was a liberal.
Yeah.
He knew that the only way he could get in was if he ran for NDP. He somehow stumbled his way into becoming the frickin' premier of Ontario, and was horrific. And on top of that, Bob Rae, as soon as he left, guess what he did? He became a liberal again.
Oh, yeah.
And guess what? He's working for the Liberal right now on behalf, I believe, of the UN.
Yeah.
And so this man is far from being NDP. Yeah, maybe he ran and was the freaking premier, but for the majority of his career, he was a liberal.
Of course.
And so it's absolutely hilarious when they try and say that.
And I mean, at that time, the reason why Rae was elected was that the Conservative Party was as antiquated as the Soviet Communist Party at that time. And it had been in power so long that it was tired. It didn't know what brand it was selling anymore. And people were tired of it. And it was one of those things that it was a protest vote, because the Liberals at that time were not were not very effective. Rae got in, and he really did not govern very well.
Oh, God,
and he upset the wrong people. And had he not done certain things that he had done, he may have still lost the election, but he would have saved the party.
Yeah.
And then after that, it was a long wilderness for the NDP.
Oh yeah.
An
That's
incredibly long wilderness. And then the most horrific thing was not Harris. Everybody knew Harris was a terrible human being, and all of those damn Tories in there. But it was this this father dad McGuinty story that they started telling, the premier dad crap that they
jeez.
sold the people of Ontario, and yet he did the exact same thing as Harris, except he did it with a sweater on,
Oh my God.
right? So that you had austerity, you had cutbacks, you had no extra money going into ODSP, but he did it with a sweater. And he said, you know, folks, we've got to save some money here. And I'm going, from what? Right?
Yeah.
And it was this complete collapsing thing. And I'll tell you though, what's interesting is that when Harris was in government, he cut taxes. Now, but it's an interesting thing, because when Harris was starting out, I was 26 or 27, or maybe 30, I don't know. But I was really low waged, and I ran a cable company, but I was incredibly low waged, and I was probably making about $22,000 a year. Before Harris, I was being taxed more.
Oh jeez.
Right, I was being taxed more, and it's an amazing thing that if you're making $22,000 a year, and somebody throws you an extra $1,000 by cutting up OHIP, so that's pretty good. Even though you know that you're never going to get ahead, you have an extra $1,000 in your pocket, and that's how Harris won, because he did sell it to the low income working class. I'm throwing an extra $1,000, $2,000 in your pocket that you can spend what you want, but we're going to cut back on OHIP. And for most people that are in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, they're not going to use healthcare except to have children, right? So that they're going to be so far distant from it, they're going, it doesn't matter to me. And that's the same thing that McGuinty did when he took over, was except he brought back more taxes on the lower incomes as well.
Love that.
Yeah. So as you know, may or may not know, I'm a counselor here in my community. And I recently passed a motion to condemn the appointment of Mike Harris to the Order of Ontario.
Yes.
Very happy about that. We'll be working on a letter from our community to that effect. So it's very, very exciting. You know, it's been, looking back, like, did they think it was a good idea? Like, I don't even think many Tories liked him.
No,
like also after COVID.
And the point is, it is like rubbing it in everybody's face. Number one, the horrendous thing at April Wash, but also the fact is that what he did with the privatization of long-term care, and that he is now a multimillionaire because he works for long-term care. So the
destruction of Ontario welfare.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, it's incredible. Like, even if
and also Walkerton. Right? I mean, the man is covered
how many deaths
of Ontarians, right? It's like under his watch. I cannot remember the woman's name, but she was on benefits, and it was cut back so badly that she starved to death.
It's awful.
Right? She starved, literally, they cut her off. They had,
yes,
it was horrendous during Mike Harris's regime. And I remember this because my brother was a schizophrenic, or he was diagnosed as a schizophrenic. And to get on benefits, it was very hard to get ODSP even as a diagnosed schizophrenic. So he had to go on to general welfare. And they tried to make him go every 2 weeks looking for work.
It's horrible.
And of course, I mean, what I did was because I just fudged the stuff, and I knew people in other businesses, and I said, just sign this, right, and say he was looking for work, sort of thing. But to try to humiliate people that have disabilities, mental illness, or just have the sheer bad luck of not being employable is reprehensible. It is inhuman, and it should disqualify you from public office.
Oh, 100%. 100%. It was especially a slap in the face too, because so many people with disabilities are in long-term care. So many people who are elderly have to go into long-term care. Basically sold off for long-term care. And Nora Loretto did an impeccable job in recording every single death that has happened in long-term care. And I believe the highest one in Ontario is 72 deaths.
That's outrageous.
Out
Absolutely.
of hundreds have died in Ontario, and he has
Is that
blood in
tender
his
care?
hands. Let me look specifically which one. So 72 is Camilla Care Community in Mississauga.
I
But-
live very close to Pinecrest, which was one of the earliest hit. They're about 20 minutes from my home. And it's just devastating for that community and Bob Cage, and
Horrendous.
the way that COVID was able to move through the community and in through the homes. It's
I mean, I would suggest, and I might be totally wrong about this, but I would suggest that the majority of LTC deaths are coming in, well, they're coming in for profit LTC homes, but they're not coming in for the LTC homes for the very rich. They're coming in for the ordinary people that might have a small pension that is being used to pay for their rooms, food, and that they're being doubled up and tripled up in their houses, which means that they're just living off their pension. And that means that they are basically just product. And that's because, and I know for a fact that if we had thousands of rich old people die, this would have stopped a long time ago.
Oh, 100%. There's a horrid fact that even when it comes to vaccines, that it will take us a decade to vaccinate every single Canadian at this rate.
Yeah.
And a Sunnybrook, once again, a Sunnybrook surgeon, the head of general surgery, has come out and said this is absolutely ridiculous. And he wasn't blaming Canadians.
That's my surgeon.
That's your surgeon. Amazing surgeon. And one thing I like about him is that he didn't blame the people.
No.
He blamed the government.
No.
He said, we have the government sitting on vaccines, or we can mass produce them, I believe, at the Montreal Institute of Research. I'm botching that name, I believe, but it's an institute in Montreal, that we can mass produce them and we can do double the amount for every single Canadian.
Yeah.
And I loved that he said, you know what? That's not really a people issue. It's the fact that our government has the capacity to do something and we're sitting here and doing nothing. We're like sitting ducks.
Oh, of course. Right. And it's one of those things. And again, it is that with the Tories, specifically the Tories, they have determined, and they've seen that in the States and they've seen it in Britain, that societies will take mass death. They will, because they have been trained to be consumers rather than citizens.
Exactly.
They have lost their commitment to their communities. And because of that, they know that they can get away with a large amount of people dying, as long as they are people that are dying that aren't the people that you're going to have over for Christmas. They have to be from the lower echelons of society, or they have to be the old that are housed away and you don't see.
Exactly.
And that's how they've been working it, so that you have racialized people that have a higher capacity for losing their lives through this.
Exactly.
You have people that live in cramped housing. You have the elderly, of course, and you have everybody that is financially unstable that has a greater chance of getting this and becoming severely ill.
When you looked at the Toronto stats, actually, when you would look at the spread out of all the specific subsections of Toronto, and you saw that all the communities that were predominantly communities of color were the ones that hit the worst. Especially, I think, specifically Black communities were hit the worst during the first wave. And the thing that I liked to say, but I would say, is that our government is essentially, for example, long-term care. These people aren't right now contributing to capitalism, so they're not contributing to the liberal donors. So why would the liberals care for them, sadly? Yeah, and they're essentially saying, you know what, we don't care if they all die off, because they're not contributing to our donors, and they don't see them as humans. They don't see the people with disabilities as humans. They don't see the elderly as humans. They don't see the people who make under $5,000 a year as humans, who contribute to our society, whether it's financially or not. They contribute, and they don't see them. They don't contribute to my donors, then I don't care for them. And I don't care if they die from COVID. And it's absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the other thing is too, is that with the long-term care profit homes, they know that they've got lots of product that everybody gets old, everybody uses it, right? So that they know that, one dies, we'll fill up that bed tomorrow. And that's a major problem, which is
They
because
have to fill that bed tomorrow.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And the thing is, though, that you look at all of this and you're going, you have hundreds of millions of dollars worth of profit, and you can't pay a decent wage to your PSWs, right? That you cannot pay a decent
it's
wage.
ridiculous.
You cannot create a pension plan for them. You cannot give them sick days. You cannot give them health care. And as it turns out, to a certain degree, the Canadian government is one of the major investors in LTCs, in the pension plan.
No, it's horrendous. The situation in long-term care. John, I don't know if you know, my granddad recently went into a long-term care home.
No, I
during
didn't.
The pandemic. He got into a good one owned by the city of Toronto.
Yeah.
Very comfortable, for end of life care,
Yeah.
and just overjoyed that he's in
Yeah.
a publicly owned space, and we have a cat. Ladies
Yeah, I know.
and
I was
gentlemen,
wondering. Yeah.
our first cat here.
Here's my child.
Hey.
She was banging at my door. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's okay. I've gone and gotten a pint twice already, and we've only been here for an hour and 30 minutes. So
No worries. Sorry, she was banging at my door, so that's why I had to leave.
no, that's okay. We were just talking about long-term care. I was just saying, my granddad is in a long-term care home now, and he's in a public one, and we're very happy about that. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we can wish for everyone. So let's take the profit out of long-term care. Let's make home care accessible,
Yeah.
which is part of that, I think number one piece about what you were talking about, Shelby. When you see that like breakdown of where the caseload is in the GTA, it's all on the outskirts, and those are the service providers. Those are the workers, the working class people, the people going paycheck to paycheck, who are being impacted by COVID-19. It's not the bankers, it's not the real estate agents, it's not the developers, it's not the tech workers, it's not anybody who's in the downtown core. It's the people that have the hands-on work dealing with people or dealing with situations where they don't have stable work. They don't have a living wage from their employer. They don't have the benefits they need. They can't take time off, and that's what's happening.
Exactly.
And we need to support those people. Those people are more important than any fucking banker on Bay Street.
Yeah, our society
Here's the
almost
first
collapsed.
swear for me.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Our
It's okay.
society almost collapsed when all of the service workers couldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
And it wasn't when Bay Street all of a sudden couldn't go to their jobs anymore. We don't really care. We don't need the CEOs. We need the workers. We need the people who make them all that money. We're nothing without them. We're nothing without our service workers. We're nothing without our workers who, like, you know what I mean, the workers who work within like collecting garbage, or workers who are working everything.
Yeah, and I mean the simple fact, and it is, and I find it very frustrating with the media that they're not pushing this idea that Doug Ford actually cut the only healthcare legislation that actually provided 3 days. That was it. You got 3 days, under Wynn's government that she proposed. I think it was 3 days, wasn't it?
It was 3.
Yeah, right. But he cut that because he said we can't afford that. And now we need more than 3 days for our workers. We need up to 4 weeks and long-term care facilities, right? And this is standard across things. And if we don't do these things, you are going to find that the most unfortunate thing is that I think that if the left does not capture the working class, really captures them, this is all going to go as right as the United States.
Exactly.
Because the point is that when you look at somebody like Kenny, you're going, the man's a sociopath.
Literally.
He is a sociopath, and yet he could still win the next election, and probably will, because the collective memory of Canadians, or all voters, is non-existent. They forget it as if it just happened 10 years ago rather than 10 months ago.
Well,
and the pandemic will be, oh my God, we got to cut. We got to have these cuts because I don't want my taxes going up.
It's absolutely insane. Like, especially considering that I think we've had Ford for 2 years.
Yeah.
And the liberals, who are the reason why we have Ford in the first place, all of a sudden are shooting up in the polls. It's like, don't you remember we got Ford because the liberals miserably failed?
And you know what? And my feeling is now, I mean, my feeling is that if the liberals had been the provincial government, I don't think there would have been much difference between them and Ford.
Oh God,
Not at all.
No,
Not
no,
at all.
no.
Honestly, I don't think in the way that the pandemic unfolded and the reaction to it, it would have been about the same, except they would have been wearing sweaters. And
Yeah,
that would have been
basically.
it, right? So it would have been like, well, we understand, we feel this. Let's, talk to human resources.
Mhm.
And that would be it. And they would try to diffuse it with buzzwords and nudge theory. But in the end, they would not be doling out the money.
We would have Kathleen Wynne on CTV and CBC every day saying, folks,
Can't afford
we're
it.
in this together.
Yeah.
We have to look out for one another.
Oh, jeez.
And she would take the big red sweater off and she'd walk right into the private jet down to St. Bart's.
Yep.
And that's exactly what would happen, and we'd have Dr. Eric Hoskins as the health minister still. And he would be like, sorry, folks, we didn't want to mess up the budget. So you got to pay $25 if you want the COVID vaccine every time.
Yep.
We're looking out for the middle class.
Hell yeah.
It would have been a as much of a nightmare as it is with Ford. And this is what, and again, and I've said this time and time again, because you see it with UK media and that sort of thing. There are a lot of good journalists and that sort of thing. But the problem is that too many of them have been co-opted by a system where they are hanging out with the politicians and the business people because of where their wage scale is. So
Exactly.
that their entire empathy are with their neighbors, who are the politicians and the business people, rather than the people that they're reporting on, because they left that financial scene when they started getting paid good money. And I'm not saying, because a lot of journalists get paid crap, but the journalists being paid crap are not the ones covering politics.
Yeah, they're not the ones on CTV News. They're not the
No,
ones,
exactly.
especially on CBC. Let me tell you
Yeah.
that. They're not the ones working for the mass corporations. And they're not working for New York Times. They're not working for all those major ones. They're not working for those. And why would you have the interest of the average person if you are making hundreds of thousands a year to millions in some instances? Why would you think of the worker? And it's absolutely disgusting.
And that's like I said, and that's how news stories become slanted, not even by a deliberation, but just because you're going, well, I understand more about this politician because my kids play hockey together or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And instead of going like, I don't understand that person that's yelling, that's only making $32,000 a year and says that they can't afford their rent, right?
Exactly.
I don't get that, right? Maybe if you saved a little bit more, which is the interesting thing, because, and I'll tell you this, and this is from somebody I know down in the States. And again, I like listening to these stories because it gives me a good handle on it. I do not agree with what this person was saying, but this person was going, I don't agree with stimulus checks. And I said, why don't you agree with stimulus checks? And he goes, because they'll just spend it at Best Buy. And I'm going, that's the point of a stimulus check. It's to stimulate the economy.
Yes.
Right? And he goes, well, why don't they pay down their debts? And I'm going, because they cannot afford to pay down their debt. They may need things like groceries, clothing, right? Mm-hmm. Or now and then, and this is the point. You know what? Life is shit enough. If you want a big TV and watch some Netflix, be my guest, because it's 100%. A short kick at the can, and who cares?
Well, yeah, and even then, it's like with the stimulus checks, because I actually did research and once again wrote another article. I don't keep like doing that, but I did write an article on the guaranteed living basic income, and the Ontario McMaster one was exceptional. It was cut off by the poor government prematurely. But the research that we got from it was that most people's lives significantly improved. And they didn't go and what people would say, oh, they wasted the money on drugs or whatever. That didn't happen.
Well, of course not.
And it's once again stimulating the economy. With the guaranteed living basic income in Ontario, people could go back to school. Yeah. People could actually enjoy life and actually enjoy childcare, could afford childcare. And people...
What it does is, what it does, what it will do for a large swath of the population is give them security,
Exactly.
which means that they are not being driven by the sheer reality of going, am I going to lose where I'm going to live?
Yeah.
Am I going to live on the streets? Will I be able to get my kids this type of clothing or braces or any of these things? Because and we know it works because they even did it. The feds did it with the child benefits now, which do help to a certain degree, but they're tied to children, whereas it should be tied to individuals.
Exactly.
Individuals have a right to receive this money, and once you reach a certain level of income, anyways, it's clawed back.
Exactly.
Which is the same crap that when I was hearing this about CERB people abusing this and that, and I'm going, you know what? Everybody has to file their taxes. It will be clawed back if there is any type of abuse.
Exactly.
Why don't we worry about Air Canada's $400 million? That's abuse.
That's abuse. Why don't we worry about the billions of dollars that are stripped from us in tax havens and in
Of course.
tax shelters? And why don't we worry about the people of just in general? It's truly outstanding. And we don't care about that, but we care about a person who's making $22,000 a year who may be abusing the stimulus check. And it's like, they're not the issue though.
Of course not. But you see, but the thing is, and this is again, and this has been the wedge politics that has been used since they increased the franchise to men and women in the turn of the 20th century. That this idea of going, there is somebody stealing from you, and it's not the rich, it's the guy beneath you.
Yep.
And then you're going, and you go, well, you can see those, right? Yeah, you can see they're stealing them. They're enjoying more food than you are, which is all crap.
Yep.
But the thing is that irritate and irk people that are not willing to actually reflect on who is stealing from.
Exactly.
And stealing their opportunities and their right to a pleasurable life.
Exactly. And everyone, that's the thing that where I don't even agree with like a living wage. I agree that we should have a wage that allows people to more than just live, but enjoy their life. So like, once again, yes, I agree that yes, we should have a living wage, but it should be more than just that. Why shouldn't people be allowed to go out and go to the movies maybe once a week? Why shouldn't they be able to be allowed to go get their coffee? Why do we just have to live? Why do we just be another cog in the machine of capitalism?
Bread and roses.
Yes.
Comrades.
Yep.
It just upsets me because it's like, no, we should be here to enjoy life. We should be able to get that coffee. We shouldn't have to like count every single cent we have. And what I'm scared is like what you were saying at the start, John, of this, is that I'm scared that what we're going to come out of this is going to be what the shock doctrine stated, Naomi Klein, economic shocks. We're going to have to cut. And because we can't afford it. And I'm sorry, guys, we're in a state of emergency because COVID, and we need to reduce the debt. And then we're not going to move to socialism. We're not going to move to the left. We're not going to nationalize long-term care. We're not going to put long-term care under the Canada Health Act. We're not going to get pharmacare. And my own MP has made it very clear, once I was able to get him to say it on Twitter, Mark Gerritsen, I'm going to call him out here, that he's essentially not even going to vote for the NDP's pharmacare bill.
Oh, of course not.
And it's absolutely disgusting, especially in the times where people of economic insecurity, where people are losing their jobs, people are losing their pharmacare, and they're losing their dental care. On top of that, I'm going to call it the NDP. It's not a universal dental care system that the NDP are proposing. It's essentially for those who don't have insurance, they can buy into this system. No, we need a full universal dental care system. People shouldn't have to worry about missing teeth.
Well, not only that, but missing teeth. And this is the point, is that you can see, right? The point is that somebody with missing teeth, you already know, you know what? You're not going to get that job.
No, you're not.
You're not going to get that job. You are going to be marginalized even more so.
Exactly.
You are not going to be able to feel good about yourself. You're not going to have any of those rights because you do not even have the right to get dentures. And
no,
these are the frightening things. And that they do, and that this is done. And people will go, well, I don't understand why they should get it. I'm going, because it's a human
right to have clean teeth and healthy teeth.
Why is it so controversial to advocate for human fucking rights?
Yes.
And it's generally from people that I find that if you look at their background and that sort of thing, I'm going, so you were always at the top of the heap. not because you were smarter than anybody else, but because if you're at the top of the heap, it's really hard to dislodge you, even if you are a moron, even
Exactly.
if you are lazy, you will always be protected by that group. So
Mhm.
more or less, unless you do something horrendously bad, you
Mhm.
will always have economic wherewithal. And it's the same thing, because I was talking about that with somebody else a couple of days ago. I do not think that democracy can work anymore as long as property is held by 20% of the population.
Mhm.
That the
Yeah.
housing crisis has diminished the rights of people
Mhm.
to actual wealth. Because if
It's
you can't get on that
insane.
property ladder, you have to depend on your income.
Mhm.
And your income will never equate to what your house will inflate to. And
Exactly.
that's the problem, because everybody has put their money in houses that
Mhm.
could. And it's the same thing that will be happening now.
Mhm.
If they find that people are losing their houses, it's not the poor buying the houses, because the houses
No.
never really go down.
Mhm.
It's just more wealthy people that buy those houses and then rent them out for exorbitant wages to pay the mortgage.
Exactly.
And this stuff is eroding any sense of democracy, because until people have access to wealth and access to leisure and access to an ability to become part of a functioning society rather than being on the lower tiers of it. And I say everybody that's on the lower tiers, you're looking at people that $50,000, $60,000 and below are on the lower tiers now.
Exactly.
There is no real middle class that my parents had
No.
when they
Yeah.
could buy a house in Scarborough in the 1960s for $13,000.
Yeah.
And that my dad was like making,
Oh,
I don't know,
jeez.
like $8,000 a year. And yet he could still take an entire family across Canada in a Ford
Yep.
Rio.
Yep.
Right. And all of that could be done without needing to borrow money.
Yep. It's insane.
Yeah.
It's truly insane. And that's where a lot of Canadians, I think, are so didn't get to experience that. So they think this is all that I'm good for. I don't deserve that coffee I enjoy from McDonald's, or I don't deserve to go on vacation. I don't deserve that sick day. It's like, no, you deserve more than 10 sick days. You deserve more than just one coffee you get maybe once a week. You deserve that. It's unbelievable that in our society that we have told people that you're undeserving and that
We've
you're not
shamed 'em.
worth it. We
Yeah.
shamed them.
Of course.
As a society, it's absolutely disgusting. It's
Is.
disgusting the amount of shame involved in policing people's behavior and how we have victimized, or not victimized, humiliated
Mhm.
people that need help.
Yeah.
Whether it's refugees, whether it's somebody on
Mhm.
ODSP, OW, it does not matter.
Mhm.
The way that we treat each other as human beings
Exactly.
has changed drastically. It didn't start at Mike Harris, but let's go back to Mike Harris. 1995, 20% cut to Ontario welfare.
Yep.
And then bring in ODS POW. And you've got people that the rates have not changed much
Nope.
since 1995.
It's not
But can you
living.
imagine the difference in price of apartment from 1995
Yep.
to 21 years later, 20
Uh-huh.
years later? Here we are.
Mhm.
Here we are now. It's ridiculous. City of Peterborough is not an expensive place. You're looking at $2,000
Kingston's
for
the
a
same.
1 or 2 bedroom
Yeah.
apartment.
Mhm.
And you need to be making 4 or 5 grand a month. It ain't happening.
No, it's
The
not.
entire market is outpriced the residents. So the residents, they can't go anywhere. They're stuck where they need to be stuck. You've
Mhm.
got complete stagnation of movement. So if you're going to look at even like the marketability of a real estate market when it comes to rentals, the
Mhm.
rentals need to be affordable. And if the
Exactly.
rentals are not affordable, you create a housing bubble.
Exactly.
And the entire system creates a housing bubble.
And it
We didn't learn
collapses.
anything from the United States.
No, we didn't learn from the 2008 crash anything.
Nothing. We learned nothing.
No, and what's absolutely frightening about that crash, and it's the same thing, was that it amazed me. And I read that it was, I think, in the Atlantic, but it was that corporations bought up thousands of repossessed houses in the United States and rent them out now. So they're making hundreds of millions of dollars overcharging on rents on houses that they bought at below market value. And these people are now stuck in these houses that they don't own. They have no equity and they can't move anywhere unless they get evicted, because they're completely stuck in as you said, in their geography of place because of financial circumstances. And what we're creating is the same circumstances that forced people out on the streets in the 1930s, in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
And that you will find, and actually they do exist here, even to you are finding the creation of flop houses again, right?
Yeah.
And unregulated illegal flop houses for people on the lower.
The first place I moved into was a flop house.
Yeah.
15 years ago. That's what I moved into. Lived in a flop house. I paid,
It's unacceptable.
I think it was $70 a month.
Yeah.
Sad.
But they're not even charging that anymore. They're charging massive dollars because in the sense of they're trying to take as much from everybody as they possibly can.
We have bunk houses. It's bunk houses, John.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I know. It's absolutely, and it's the same thing, right? Because, and all this leads to is the end of democracy, the end of society, and either one of two things: the darkness of fascism or rebellion. Because people there is always tipping points in history. Doesn't matter where. It's like, and then you get issues like the Winnipeg general strike, where something pushes everybody to the limits. And for the Winnipeg general strike, it actually did help society. Yeah. It improved society. Now, I think they would have just killed them all.
Oh yeah, probably.
Right. I think that they right. But it's just because I think they thought at that time, and they were right about it. They go, so there's too many of them, right? We're going to have to make concessions. And I think the problem is that we have to get politicians that are going to start to force through political persuasion, through actual mass action, nonviolent mass action, like general strikes, like sit-ins, anything that stops the economy to get people.
That's it. That's exactly it. You're exactly right, John. The thing is, we have a system of oligarchs that exist in our capitalist society, right? We have a political class. The political class is one thing. We have the working class and we have the oligarchs.
Yep.
And sometimes we have the political class advocate for the working class, but oftentimes the political class is always going to advocate for the oligarch class.
Yep.
And someday will come when the working class will realize that the only way to influence the oligarch class is to stop the flow of money.
That's right.
And that's something that frustrated me when
that's where we talk about general strike. But who do we need for general strike? We need our allies in political class. We need our allies in community organizers. We need our allies in racial justice. We need our allies in labor. We need our allies in your neighbors, in regular people, in people that do the community picnic, in people that do the block party, in people that put on a barbecue, in people that like run the oh, we have a compost heap for the community. Those are the people that we need. We don't have to put all of our eggs in the basket of electoralism.
Yeah.
Which is good. Sure. We should always participate in electoralism. I think it was Lenin that used to say that.
Probably.
But we also need to focus on mutual aid and things outside of electoralism in building communities that support each other, that love each other, and that want the best for each other.
We need to organize. That's something that Canada has really struggled with.
It's not even organized. We're so like Western society is so outside of organized. It's never been there. It's, you got to know your neighbor. That's where we're at. You can't organize Western society. Know your neighbor and go from there. That's what I believe.
I agree. I agree with that. And I think the thing is that, but what we have to do, and I honestly, for at least the provincial election, which is, I think, the watershed, right? That because I honestly believe that if we do not get a minority government in or an NDP government in, we are seriously buggered, honestly. And that means that we have to use trade unions, we have to use teachers as individuals, we have to use the medical profession, doctors, nurses, all of those people that were betrayed by Ford, and say, these are the people you have to vote for. We have to vote intelligently. So when the NDP can take that seat, they take that seat. And if it's a liberal that takes the seat, because there is a massive swing difference, then we say that or the Greens. But the point is, it's to unseat Ford and hold to the left as much as possible. And my feeling is that way we're going to get an NDP government in.
Yeah.
Because, and without, and if we get a liberal government in, we're screwed just as much as a Tory government. We need a strong left presence in Ontario. And that will be the only way that we can drag the country leftwards instead of its inevitable drift rightwards. It is absolutely frightening when you look at Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, the sheer horrors that are going on, and Quebec, by right-wing governments that have dismantled what was already stripped down to the bones in the 1990s through liberal austerity in the federal transfers. And if we allow it to continue, there's no point in Canada, because it will be a place for only the top 10% wage earners.
Yeah.
Everybody else will be their servants. You may as well be working at a Mexican resort, because that's what it'll feel like.
And like, you guys may disagree with me, but I'm at the point now where, like, I'm ready to start a revolution. Like, I'm ready to get on the streets. I'm ready to stop, have mass people going on strike. I'm at the point where I don't think we can change much unless we get out in the street, unless we start saying to our politicians that, well, we're no longer going to start paying you then. We're going to stop going to work unless you start working for us. And
100%.
I'm kind of at this point where Canadians, I guess maybe you can see it a bit in Britain. And definitely what showed me a lot is where the left came together was on the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
That was impeccable.
Yeah.
And it shows you that, yes, you can disagree with violence. I'm not saying the Black Lives Matter movement were violent, but sometimes when you have to get on the streets, look at the French Revolution. I'm not saying we have to start violence, we have to start tearing shit down, but we're getting to the point where capitalism, during that time, you had a monarchy in France at the time, and they ended up sadly
Let them eat
going.
McLean's frosty cake.
Yeah, we're at a point now where the only way I think we're going to change anything, just like the Black Lives Matter movement, they made a lot of momentum by getting out in the street and saying, no, we're not going to stop marching in the streets until you start implementing these bills. We're not going to get in the way of capitalism until you start doing stuff for us.
Yeah.
I think we need to literally shut down Bay Street, and we need to actually come together. And I guess the word is organize or whatever. We need to do it on a mass scale, though, not like on a very huge scale. And it's difficult in Canada because for some reason we never seem to do it.
Well, and we don't, and actually it's a worldwide phenomenon.
It's a worldwide phenomenon.
France is very good.
France is militant.
And they're very good at that.
Mhm.
And I think that the direction will be, if anything, will be the environmental issues. Will drive people out onto the streets, will drive the younger generations out onto the streets.
Mhm.
It will not drive my generation out onto the streets.
The Gen Z
In a collective sense, I would say my generation will give lip service to it, as they always do.
Yeah.
And say, why don't we have a blue paper on it? And then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
And then, and then
It's the
hopefully
Paris Accord. The Paris Accord.
Yeah.
The fucking Paris Accord.
And that's why, aside from me and there's very many honorable people in my generation, but most of them are shit. And most of them, I mean, I knew in the 1980s that it wouldn't take much for them to sell out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but that we have to start pushing these types of demonstrations, but also bringing it in, because the simple fact is that if you have a demonstration that is just on a Sunday between 12 and 1,
No.
people just think, great, it's the St. Patty's Day parade or whatever it is. It is nothing until you actually
It's not
cause
effective.
a disturbance to the economy.
That's the only thing.
And
That's
as
the only
long-
way.
And you do it within, legal frameworks and all of that stuff. But the point is that what was one of the most effective stoppages was the rail strike.
With the
Yeah.
Wet'suwet'en. The
It-
Wet'suwet'en as well.
Brilliantly done. It was executed, and there was public support for it.
Yes.
Yep.
It was tied to two things, but the most important thing for the general public was the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indigenous
Wet'suwet'en
rights
did an
was the
amazing
real
job.
reason why it was really important, but the environment thing was the thing that tipped it over, and people said, you know what, I can agree with this.
Hmm.
And it
Yeah.
was one of those things because, like I said, I needed the train service, but it didn't bother me because I thought, this is more important, right?
Mhm.
I find other
I
ways.
think I remember seeing on Twitter that you were held up at the rail station.
Yeah, but
Really?
I thought this was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
You know what's funny? I was actually in a hotel in Brantford at the
Yeah.
time, and it was funny. I was there for a conference, and I was giving a talk or something, but I was in Brantford, just up from there.
Yeah.
I just want to look back at the chat and see some of the folks. We've had some folks who have been with us the whole time.
That's
we got
good. That's really encouraging.
a little Viva la Revolucion. A little dual power is mutual aid, smiley face.
Cease is going to be on my ass after this.
Mutual aid networks are so important right now. Political parties have routinely failed, including the NDP, in my
Yeah, they
opinion.
have.
Yep, that's
Horgan.
valid. Totally valid.
Look at Horgan with the
Totally
Wet'suwet'en crisis.
ONDP lands to be much left-leaning than the federals, so Ontario could win, change the game for sure. Yeah. Canada's many organized mass actions, Indigenous communities have been doing it for generations, Quebec doing it for generations. I agree with you, Shelby, but these are actions to learn from. And then we also had a note here, Shelby, and I really need the scoop here now. Are you running for office?
No, I'm not. I wish. No, I'm not running for office. Maybe in the future.
Maybe in the future?
Just right now, because I'm in school and because of economic inequality, I can't afford to. I at minimum with my degree, I need to get a master's, so I wouldn't even consider it until I'm finished my master's degree. I'm looking to do my PhD, but unfortunately, like if I were to run, it wouldn't be till after my master's. Like I would love to go in and ruffle up some feathers with Mark Gerritsen because like I'm probably his public enemy number one on Twitter at least, and I would love to run against him, but unfortunately, right now I just don't think it's the time. But I would love to like start a revolution though, if anyone's down, and then I'll run. But I'm good for that.
Well, I think that like going back into like we talk about like electoralism and then revolution. I think it's electoralism and mutual aid. And I think that revolution is bound in mutual aid with the intent of becoming revolutionism. But I'm not an intellectual. I'm just a hick.
Neither of the same. So don't worry.
I'm a hick. And I drive a pickup truck. I like guns. I live in the bush.
There you go.
And I like to drink whiskey.
But you're a socialist.
This is me. I happen to be a socialist through all.
We love those type of socialists.
We're a hill. I don't know what I don't want to pigeonhole myself like a hillbilly socialist.
We love those.
But we exist.
We love them.
And we're getting close to the time. So I wanted to take a moment and introduce you to what I've been sipping on the evening.
Good stuff.
Is that our sponsor?
I hope that they would sponsor us here at Tullamore Dew down in Ireland. It's accessible not only to Catholics, but also to Protestants.
Okay.
It's completely delicious. I received a set of promotion glasses from the 1908 McLaughlin Buick Company. I found at Lee's in Peterborough, but I just wanted to give you guys a maybe we'll start with John and then go to Shelby with high hopes for 2021. What do you think's going to happen?
Well, that's a tall order. I think that that the winter months are going to be horrendous for COVID. I think we're going to see mass death, both in Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, Europe. And I think that it may cause some political unsettling, that you're going to find that people are not taking lockdowns well, that because of the winter months and all of this stuff. So I think that there is a potential for disruption and in society. And also, until Trump leaves, I think that is also a worry of what he will or can do, or even what he can upset in the future by whatever pardon he does, or whatever anything he tries to do in the Mideast before he gets out. Now, after that, I think we're going to see a federal election, and I would really, really hope that at the best, because I would like to see an NDP government. I know that's not going to happen. What I would like to see is a minority Liberal government, because a minority Liberal government is something that is controllable and will always tack to the left. And that is the most important thing. Ontario, I think there's going to be an election in the fall, and I think that we have to work tooth and nail to make sure that Ford does not get a majority, and that we get some sort of left of center government in the province. Worldwide, I think we're going to have a massive issue with refugees again, and we already have, and they're dying in unmistakable and horrendous numbers all through the borders of Europe, and it is getting worse. And also, I fear for what we have done to refugees that have crossed in from the United States, and what will happen after Biden comes, because what will happen is we'll go, the United States is now the third country, right? We don't need to accept refugees, and that's going to be a dangerous thing, because they are abused in the United States, and they're not actually treated well here either.
No, they're not.
But it is a hope, anyways, that we get our act together with the refugee crisis. I don't think we're going to. I'm actually very pessimistic, and
So am I. I'm a pessimistic person.
I live very close to an immigration detention center.
No, I love
It
that.
is horrifying.
Oh God.
I've been to them in France for refugees.
They exist in Lindsay, Ontario.
Yeah. Lindsay. Well, it's because they've got the prison there, right? It's just not a way onto the cottage for some. But it's like I said, I will leave it at the fact that I am not very optimistic for what's going to happen in 2021. I think 2022 might have more hope.
Well, at least you're hopeful eventually.
Well,
Yeah.
eventually.
And Shelby, what do you think?
I'm gonna have to mostly agree with John. Like I'm an incredibly pessimistic person. I'm just hoping that the bill for to set up the framework for the laws to be implemented for universal pharmacy passes. That's all I'm hoping for. Do I think it's going to pass? I really don't know at this point in time. I'm not that optimistic for this year. I guess I have to be brutally honest. Maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic for 2025. If we're gonna look at it like that when it comes to left movements.
Because then you'll have your PhD.
Yeah, I wish I had my PhD by then. Holy shit. In neuroscience, I wish. But I don't know. I don't really have much to say other than what John said. John just hit it out of the water. Unfortunately.
Well, that's okay. Maybe we'll throw it back to the chat before we say goodnight. Is there anything you want us to answer? Give it a second here for the chat. We love our chat. Chat come through. I know you're here.
It's late.
It is late. They are there. Thanks, Sean and John and Shelby. This was beautiful. Thanks, Matthew. I'm glad that you enjoyed the show. We'll be back. I actually am going to announce the next show in just about 15 minutes
Ooh.
on the old Twitter. So you can follow me on Twitter at Brave New North, and also on at Sean Conway PTBO. Oh, that's a good question. Sean, what was your favorite memory from last election cycle? My favorite memory from the last election cycle. So I ran for the Ontario NDP in 2018.
Oh, wow.
And I had a really good time. I lost by only 1,000 votes in a 2%. It was a real nail biter.
I'm sorry.
I didn't think I was going to win, but my favorite thing was I used to go to the pub every
Oh,
single
yeah.
night.
It's a
That's
very
not
I
good
went to a
pub,
different
too.
pub in the riding every single night, and I
the
would
best.
go and I would go to every table and I have a chit chat, I have a pint, and I would say, how many signs can I sign you up for? And I usually get about 4 or 5 signs every thing. So I
Wow.
would walk back into the campaign office at 8:30 in the morning, and I'd say, I got 75 new
Oh, wow.
sign locations for you.
It's
And so
incredible.
that was always a good time. That's my best moment. I ran in Peterborough, Kawartha against an MPP by
Hell
the name
yeah.
of Dave Smith. Thanks everyone for paying attention. John, William, Seth, Jordan, John, Matthew, everyone else, Jesse. Thanks so much. We are going to say good night now. So Shelby, John, if you want to say good night, Shelby first.
Good night. Thanks for
John.
coming.
Night.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you on, well, we're actually going to be on next Saturday. I'm going to be talking about U.S. politics with our dear friend, Christo Avalise will be
Oh,
on.
wow.
Christo.
Well,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. And
Holy
maybe
crap.
some other special guests. You never know.
Maybe I'll sneak on again.
Yeah, sneak on again. You know, you have my cell phone numbers. Again, follow us on Twitter at Brave New North. Subscribe to the channel here and join us on Twitter at Brave New North. And we'll see you again for all kinds of chat about all the politics we love. So have a great
Heck
night,
yeah.
everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.